You are standing over a hole no wider than a dinner plate. The jungle around you is quiet in the worst possible way. Sweat runs down your back, your rifle feels heavy in your hands, and the earth beneath your boots suddenly seems less like ground and more like a trapdoor. Somewhere under your feet, men have been living, moving, hiding, planning, and waiting. This was one of the reasons the Viet Cong, the communist guerrilla fighters operating in South Vietnam, terrified American soldiers. The enemy was not always in front of you. Sometimes, the enemy was below you. To many Americans arriving in Vietnam, war was supposed to be a contest of firepower, mobility, and technology. The United States had helicopters, artillery, bombers, armored vehicles, radio networks, and some of the most advanced logistics in the world. The Viet Cong often had older rifles, handmade traps, and simple tools. So how could such a force create so much fear in the ranks of a modern army? How could a tunnel, dug with shovels and baskets, challenge the military power of the United States? The answer begins with the land itself. In places like Cu Chi and the Iron Triangle northwest of Saigon, the soil was hard enough to hold shape, but workable enough to dig. Over years of anti-French resistance and then war against the South Vietnamese government and its American allies, local fighters expanded small hiding spaces into entire underground networks. These were not just escape holes. They became living systems. By the mid-1960s, parts of the tunnel complexes included sleeping chambers, meeting rooms, storage caches, aid stations, kitchens, wells, and firing positions. Some tunnel entrances were hidden beneath leaves, inside termite mounds, or underwater. Others were so small that a large American soldier could barely squeeze through. If the battlefield had no clear front line above ground, what happened when it also had no clear floor? American units kept learning this lesson the hard way. A patrol might move through a village that looked abandoned, only to take fire from nowhere. A helicopter assault could secure a landing zone and sweep the area, yet the enemy would vanish before the trap closed. Then, hours later, shots might erupt from behind the very troops who thought they had cleared the area. During Operation Crimp in early 1966, American and Australian forces entered the Cu Chi region looking for Viet Cong headquarters and base areas. Instead, they discovered a vast underground world. According to later U.S. military accounts, this was one of the first moments when many commanders realized they were not dealing with isolated foxholes or bunkers, but with organized subterranean infrastructure. What do you do when the battlefield keeps disappearing in front of your eyes? That uncertainty was the first layer of fear. A visible enemy is dangerous. An invisible enemy is exhausting. The journalist and historian Stanley Carnow later described one of the central psychological burdens of the Vietnam War as the constant tension of not knowing where danger would come from. Philip Caputo, in his memoir A Rumor of War, wrote with brutal clarity about the strain of patrolling through terrain where every tree line, every hamlet, and every silent patch of ground seemed to conceal attack. Tunnels intensified that fear because they made invisibility permanent. A Viet Cong fighter could be under a trail, beneath a hut, or inside a tunnel wall while American troops walked overhead. How do you rest when the earth itself feels hostile? The tunnels were frightening not only because they hid men, they also hid time. A guerrilla force could survive a sweep, wait for the Americans to leave, and reappear. That meant even successful operations could feel hollow. U.S. troops could burn huts, destroy rice stores, and call in artillery, only to discover days later that the local infrastructure of resistance still existed underground. American power was designed to destroy targets, but a tunnel system was not a single target. It was a patient organism. Bombs might collapse one section while another remained usable. Tear gas could be vented through hidden shafts. Flooding often failed because the tunnels had drainage and multiple levels. How do you measure progress when the enemy survives by refusing to fight on your terms? The second layer of fear was physical. The entrances were tiny, the passages were narrow, dark, hot, and airless. Some sections were no more than a shoulder-width crawl space. American soldiers soon coined a name for the men sent into them: tunnel rats. These were volunteers, often smaller men, who entered with a flashlight, a pistol, and sometimes a knife. They crawled downward into a maze, where a wrong touch could trigger a grenade, a trap, or an ambush at arm's length. There was no room to turn around quickly, no room to stand. Sometimes there was barely room to breathe. Imagine hearing your own breath echo off the dirt walls and wondering whether the next sound will be a whisper, a gunshot, or a snake moving in the dark. This was not exaggeration. Tom Mangold and John Pennicate, in the tunnels of Cu Chi, collected testimony from both former tunnel rats and former Viet Cong tunnel builders and fighters. Their work makes clear that the terror was not just the claustrophobia, it was the uncertainty layered inside it. A tunnel could contain a command post. It could also contain a dead end rigged with explosives. It might look abandoned, but a hidden side chamber could hold a waiting defender. Former tunnel rats described probing walls, smelling for signs of people, and feeling for changes in airflow that might reveal another chamber. The darkness was not empty darkness. It was intelligent darkness. How do you fight a maze that was designed by people who knew every bend and every trap? The Viet Cong understood exactly how to weaponize that fear. The tunnel systems were part shelter, part transportation network, and part psychological trap. They allowed fighters to appear suddenly and disappear just as fast. They supported ambushes because troops could move unseen between firing points. They protected leadership and supplies. They also turned every sweep into a guessing game. American soldiers could not assume that taking a village meant taking control. A hut might conceal an entrance. A seemingly ordinary path could run over a tunnel artery. A soldier stepping out of formation to relieve himself might discover a hatch with his boot. How long would it take before every simple movement began to feel dangerous? Then there were the traps above and below ground. The Vietnam War is often remembered for booby traps, which means hidden devices meant to injure, kill, or delay. Around tunnel zones, these could include punji stakes, sharpened bamboo spikes smeared with filth, grenade traps, tripwires, scorpions placed in passages, and cramped sections designed to funnel intruders into kill points. Many American veterans remembered the emotional effect as much as the casualties. A trap did not just wound a man. It made everyone else imagine being next. It slowed patrols. It increased hesitation. It punished curiosity. The tunnel system was never just architecture. It was architecture fused with psychology. American commanders tried many methods to break that system. Engineers used explosives, bulldozers, and what became known as Rome plows, heavy machines with reinforced blades that could tear through jungle cover. During Operation Cedar Falls in 1967, one of the largest American operations of the war, U.S. forces targeted the Iron Triangle, a Viet Cong stronghold long protected by dense terrain and tunnel systems. Massive sweeps, bombardment, and engineering efforts caused real disruption. Sections were destroyed, supplies were captured, people were displaced. Yet official histories from the U.S. Army Center of Military History make clear that these gains were difficult to convert into lasting control. The infrastructure could be damaged, but the strategic problem remained. If tunnels could be rebuilt, expanded, or shifted, had the core issue really been solved? This is where the tunnel story reveals a deeper truth about the war. The tunnels terrified American soldiers because they exposed a mismatch between military doctrine and political reality. American doctrine depended heavily on mobility, superior firepower, and attrition, which means wearing down the enemy through losses. But the tunnel systems supported a form of war based on endurance, concealment, local knowledge, and political survival. The United States wanted to find and destroy enemy units. The Viet Cong often wanted to outlast sweeps, preserve cadre, and keep influence among local populations. A tunnel did not have to defeat a tank in open combat. It only had to make the tank less relevant. Is there anything more unnerving to a soldier than realizing his greatest strengths do not guarantee control? There was also a human dimension that made the tunnels even more unsettling. They were not built overnight by faceless ghosts. They were created by communities under enormous pressure. Former Viet Cong and local civilians described carrying dirt away in baskets, disguising vent holes, moving supplies at night, and treating the underground space as part of ordinary life in extraordinary circumstances. Some sections had meeting rooms and infirmaries. Huang Cam, the name commonly associated with a smokeless cooking system used in tunnel areas, became shorthand for the ingenuity required to survive underground without revealing one's position. Smoke from cooking fires was dispersed through a long buried channel so that it emerged cooled and diffused rather than as a visible column. That detail matters. It shows why the tunnels were so frightening. They were not random hideouts. They were evidence of adaptation, discipline, and planning. For the American soldier on patrol, all of this translated into a daily emotional grind. You could be the stronger force and still feel vulnerable. You could have air support overhead and still dread a patch of earth. You could secure a hamlet and still wonder what remained beneath it. You could survive one patrol only to be told tomorrow's route crossed another suspected tunnel zone. Fear in war is not always about dramatic charges or explosions. Often, it is about repetition. Step, pause, listen. Check the ground, check the tree line, check the doorway, check the earth again. How long can a human nervous system remain on alert before caution turns into exhaustion? Some of the fear came from the moral ambiguity of the battlefield too. In tunnel zones, the line between combat space and civilian space could blur in dangerous ways. Villages might contain supporters, informants, coerced civilians, or families trying simply to survive. American troops were therefore operating not only in difficult terrain, but in a politically loaded environment where certainty was rare. Every hidden entrance deepened suspicion. Every missed contact deepened frustration. The tunnels did not just conceal fighters. They deepened the sense that the war itself was slipping out of clear categories. And yet the story is not one of magic or myth. The tunnels did not make the Viet Cong invincible. American and South Vietnamese forces did discover, penetrate, and destroy many sections. Tunnel rats performed astonishingly dangerous work. Engineers adapted. Intelligence improved in some areas. But terror does not require invincibility. It only requires the steady belief that danger is close, concealed, and impossible to fully predict. The tunnels achieved exactly that. They imposed stress out of proportion to their size because they attacked confidence. They made superior firepower feel clumsy. They made every victory feel incomplete. That is why the image of the tunnel has lasted so long in the memory of the Vietnam War. This was a conflict in which advanced machines met intimate terrain, in which industrial might met political persistence, and in which the strongest army in the world often struggled against enemies who refused to stay visible. Historians still return to Cu Chi, the Iron Triangle, and the stories of tunnel rats because the tunnels symbolize more than a tactic. They symbolize the larger challenge of fighting a war when the battlefield belongs, physically and psychologically, to someone else. So when people ask why the Viet Cong tunnels terrified American soldiers, the answer is not just that they were dark or narrow or trapped, though they were all of those things. It is that they changed the meaning of the ground itself. They turned the earth into concealment, movement, survival, and surprise. They allowed a less heavily armed force to stay present under pressure. They made soldiers doubt what they could see. They forced men into spaces where every second felt borrowed. And they reminded everyone involved that in Vietnam, the war was never only on the surface. You are standing over a hole no wider than a dinner plate. At first, it looked like a simple opening in the dirt. Now you understand that it was a doorway into an entire method of war.